The internet version of the story goes like this. One guy with a laptop and AI agents doing everything, without employees or investors or a team, and then $80 million exit. That's the tweet. That's the LinkedIn post someone shared under the caption, "This is the future," with 3 fire emoji. That's the story that made 500,000 people type "amazing" in the comments, and the other half quietly open a new tab to reconsider their life choices. The real version is more interesting, because the real version has context. And context, as anyone who has ever looked at a price tag without reading the fine print knows, changes everything. Maor Shlomo is not a guy who stumbled onto ChatGPT one afternoon and accidentally became wealthy. Before Base 44, he co-founded Explorium, a data analytics company that raised $130 million in funding and had over 100 employees. He ran it as CEO for 6.5 years. He started it at 23. He raised over $100 million before he'd finished making all the mistakes that teach you how to raise over $100 million. So when the internet says solo founder with no employees sells for $80 million, what it actually means is a highly experienced startup veteran who had already done the full cycle. Enterprise clients, big team, investors, board meetings, the entire apparatus, decided to do something radically different, used AI to compress what previously would have required a much larger team, and it worked. Those are completely different lessons. One is motivational content, the other is actually useful. Guess which one spreads faster? But before we use "he was experienced" as a reason to dismiss the whole thing and go back to our day jobs, hold on. Because the tools he used are not behind a velvet rope. The AI that wrote 90% of his code? Available. The platforms he built on? Available. The distribution channels? LinkedIn, building in public, word of mouth from a product people genuinely wanted to share? Also available. None of that required being Maor Shlomo specifically. Nobody is telling you you're guaranteed to repeat what he did. Nobody is also telling you that you can't. And that second part, the fact that it's even a real question right now, is genuinely new. To understand why Base 44 was interesting as a product, you need to understand what building software companies used to look like. And by used to, I mean aggressively recently. Starting a software company meant assembling what can only be described as an entire human department store before opening day. You needed a developer, a designer, because your developer's visual taste peaked at white background, slightly darker rectangle in the middle. We're calling it a button. A salesperson, a marketing person, a social media person, which is somehow a different job from the marketing person. A customer support person. A manager for the customer support person. A product manager to tell everyone what to build. An HR person, which, when you have 6 employees, is just someone whose full-time job is setting up Google Forms that nobody ever completes. All of this before you had made a single dollar. Your burn rate was around $70,000 a month. Your login page worked 70% of the time. Congratulations, you are a founder. Shlomo had done exactly this. Explorium was the full version, and by his own description, what he genuinely loved was not the fundraising rounds or the management layers. It was sitting down with the computer, putting on music, and actually building something. So after October 7th, and a period of reserve duty in Israel, he stepped back from Explorium, handed the CEO role to his co-founder, and started a side project. No investors, no declared mission, just a founder who wanted to build something and see what happened. That side project sold to Wix for roughly $80 million, about 6 months after launch. Base 44 is an AI app builder. You type what you want in plain English, and it builds you a working application. Not a mock-up, not a screen that looks like an app until you try to actually use it, at which point it becomes a very well-designed error message. A working app, real database, user authentication, hosting, integrations, analytics, all included, all invisible to the person who just wanted a task manager with AI summaries. The category already existed when Base 44 launched. Bolt was there, Lovable was there, Several well-funded competitors with actual engineering teams were already fighting over the same users. Shlomo's answer was not, "We'll outspend them." His answer was a different product bet. Every other tool was competing on the same thing, the exciting moment where you describe something and an interface appears. Base 44 was betting that the exciting moment was not actually the hard part. The hard part is what comes right after, the moment a user discovers they need a database, and a login system, and a way to send emails, and they have to go figure out how to connect 4 separate services, each with their own documentation, their own API keys, and their own way of breaking on a Sunday evening. Base 44 made that part automatic. Their users started calling it batteries included. Shlomo called it betting that a very large number of people either don't know what an API key is or don't want to have to care. Both groups, it turned out, exist in enormous and paying numbers. Here is the part nobody in the LinkedIn comments noticed, possibly because it's slightly too recursive to fit in a caption. Base 44 is a product that lets people build software using AI. Shlomo built Base 44 using AI to write roughly 90% of the code. He reportedly stopped writing front-end code almost entirely for months. He used Base 44 itself to build the company's internal tools, documentation, CRM, user management, marketing content pipeline, coupon system, hackathon coordination. The product was powering its own company while the company was demonstrating the product. One continuous loop of AI building software to help people build software, steered by one person who knew exactly which decisions needed a human and which ones didn't. Now here's the thing worth noticing about that loop. The AI models in it, Claude, Gemini, the whole stack, those are not exclusive to former startup founders who've raised $130 million. They're available right now to anyone for roughly what you'd spend on a gym membership you'd also not use. The approach of designing your system around what the AI is already good at rather than fighting it, that's learnable. What isn't for sale is the decade of instinct behind the calls those tools were executing on. That gap is real. It's also closable, which is not the same as saying it closes on its own. Now about the solo part, he did start lean. First users were literally 3 friends sitting in his house, watching where the product broke and telling him about it. He was writing code, handling customer support, and doing marketing simultaneously. The startup equivalent of also being your own accountant, except the accounting involves MongoDB CPU configurations at 2 a.m. By the time Wix acquired Base 44, however, the company had between 6 and 8 employees. Not 0, 6 to 8. The accurate version. Base 44 started near solo, scaled to a very small team, and sold for $80 million 6 months after launch. The point is not that other people are now irrelevant. The point is that a startup which previously would have required 40 people to reach this point needed fewer than 10. That's still an extraordinary story. It just requires more nuance than fits in a tweet, which is probably why the tweet version left it out. What AI actually did in this company, concretely? It wrote the code, 90% of the code base. He designed the system architecture around what the models were already good at, building with the grain of the AI rather than against it, which sounds obvious until you try it and discover the AI has extremely specific opinions about which packages it prefers. It enabled fast iteration. When feedback came in, he could act on it faster than a normal team because the gap between decide to change something and the change exists in the product had shrunk to almost nothing. It did not make the decisions. It did not look at 50 pieces of conflicting user feedback and identify the 3 that mattered. It did not know whether the product had hit something real or was just having a good week. Those were still entirely his calls. The AI stack itself was not simple. Claude through AWS Bedrock for most coding, Gemini for complex tasks, plus serious work on cost optimization, prompt caching, context management, cheaper models where possible. He once changed a single string and moved $400,000 worth of monthly AI workload from one vendor to another. He described this as impressive. From a moat building standpoint, he also called it faintly alarming. The first users came from where all honest startup growth actually comes from: personal network, then grinding. The Product Hunt launch in January failed. He described it as miserable. 50 users, most of whom left within weeks, some of whom left harsh reviews about bugs. He took the feedback, iterated hard for 4 weeks, and started posting honestly about what was happening. Not polished brand content, but genuine updates about what he'd tried, what hadn't worked, what the tech stack looked like, and what he was going to try next. He said he started posting partly because he had no investors to update, no board to report to, no co-founder to think out loud with. The building and public posts were how he processed running a company alone. The fact that LinkedIn was extremely interested in a bootstrapped founder being honest about failing a product hunt launch turned out to be a side effect worth amplifying. He also ran a credits for sharing program. Users who posted about what they'd built on Base 44 got subscription credits. Not just testimonials, real posts showing real apps, turning the natural impulse to share into a deliberate growth loop. By March, 2 months after the failed launch, Base 44 was doing $1 million in ARR. He'd told his girlfriend in Thailand, where he was coding 12 hours a day and technically calling it a vacation, that $1.5 million ARR by year end would be cause for real celebration. He cleared that number in 4 weeks after landing home. Wix approached him first about a partnership, which became an acquisition, roughly $80 million upfront, with additional performance payments through 2029. What didn't work? The $2,000 influencer spend, which returned 0 new users. Paid advertising, still being figured out at acquisition time. MongoDB shared CPU configurations at scale, invisible until your product is growing fast and everything becomes mysteriously slow at the worst possible moment. And then there's the moat problem, which Shlomo was unusually honest about. The exciting part of Base 44, the moment where you describe something and an app appears, is also the easiest part for a funded competitor to replicate. You can copy the magic moment in a few months. What you can't easily copy is the infrastructure underneath. The database design decisions, the authentication system, the integrations, the community of users who've built real businesses on the platform, and months of compounding architectural decisions that each made the next one easier. He described the real moat as velocity, brand, and community. In other words, the moat is not, we have AI. Everyone has AI. The moat is, we've been making better decisions faster, and that gap is still growing. Less exciting as a tagline, considerably more durable as a position. The final lesson. Here's what the Base 44 story actually proves, as opposed to what the LinkedIn algorithm decided it proved. One person with AI can beat a slow team, a disorganized team, a 20-person company that takes 6 weeks to decide what to build and 3 more weeks to build it incorrectly. Against those competitors, a focused AI-powered founder with good judgment is a genuinely difficult competitor to race against. One person with AI cannot automatically beat a great team. A great team has people who are better than the founder at specific things, not because of their tools, but because they've spent a decade thinking about one problem. A great team catches the decisions you didn't know you were making. What Base 44 shows is that the gap between what one experienced person can do and what a team of 40 was previously required to do has collapsed. That is genuinely significant. It changes what's possible. It does not show that experience no longer matters. If anything, the opposite. Shlomo's decade of startup knowledge was what let him make fast, accurate decisions about what to build, what to ignore, and which 50 pieces of user feedback represented the 3 things that actually needed to change. AI was what let him act on those decisions without needing a department to carry them out. The AI generated. He decided. That's not a temporary arrangement pending the next model release. That might just be the model. And here's the part of the story that deserves to be said plainly, because the viral tweet version skipped it entirely. You can try to do what Shlomo did. The playbook is not proprietary. Build something lean. Find 10 people who love it before you try to reach 10,000 who might notice it. Post honestly about what's working and what isn't. Use AI to handle the execution while you handle the thinking. That framework is not locked behind anyone's experience or funding history. It exists, it works, and nobody is stopping you from running it. Nobody is also telling you it's going to be easy. It wasn't easy for him. He was coding 12 hours a day in Thailand and calling it a vacation. What changed is the ceiling. What one person can realistically build in 1 year with no funding and a serious AI stack, that ceiling moved dramatically. And the ceiling moving is the whole story. The people who are going to win with this are not the ones who replaced their team with bots and called it a company. They're the ones with genuinely good judgment, who know exactly which decisions only they can make, and who have delegated everything else to something that doesn't ask for equity. That's a hard person to compete against. It's also a hard person to become, which is worth mentioning before you open your laptop and start typing, "Build me an $80 million startup." Good luck.